Everyone, welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited. I have my new friend Saul Kennedy with me. Saul, why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. My name is Sol, and I am an entrepreneur. I'm a father. I'm a co-parent, and these days I run an app called Best Interest, and it's an app for co-parents, helping them to resolve resolve conflict and find more peace in what can be a really challenging environment.
I love that. And we were talking before we came on about how entrepreneurs have a problem in their life, they solve it, and then they become, suddenly they build a business around it. So let's talk about young Soul and where you came from. You mentioned that you felt you were an entrepreneur at 14. So let's start back and then we'll get to why what you're doing today is so important.
Yeah, I think that the way you describe the entrepreneurship recipe is spot on. I have always seen myself as being somewhat of a visionary. I have an idea in mind of something I would like to put out in the world, and then I do it. And it's not necessarily tied with becoming a business. So at 14, I didn't have a business model. I just wanted to make this piece of software. And the software that I made was really simple. You booted up your Windows or your Mac. This came on a floppy, by the way, and it would show you an inspirational message for your day. And it was just kind of this positive thing. And you could buy the software, I think, for what, $5-10 or something at a holiday event. And it was fun. And it got me into this idea of, okay, so I can put my fingers to code and I can produce this thing, and then people will be potentially interested and will buy it. And so that was the spark that kind of started my career and interest in software and in technology. And gosh, with the internet and the way things are going with AI, it's truly incredible how software can take our ideas and just expand them exponentially. So I'm just really excited to be in this space and to be an entrepreneur in this time.
I love it. Now, you and I are going to go deep on a couple of things, but first and foremost, I think we're in this age of doom and gloom and AI is going to end humanity. You're doing something really, really unique. And again, I have not seen Best Interest, but I want to explore it because to actually use AI to bring peace to co-parenting, that's a pretty lofty and worthwhile use of AI. So how did that come about?
Well, Jeff, I'm at a place in my life. I've started and sold many companies, and I was at Google for many years, and then I had my first kid, and I decided to become a full-time dad. And I knew that really I never needed to work again if I didn't want to, and that's a very fortunate position to be. And yet, because of my own personal experience going through divorce, going through a high conflict co-parenting situation, I knew I needed to solve this. So I didn't start Best Interest because I needed a job or I needed, whatever. I needed to solve this for people because it's so freaking painful to be going through this. And, just for those listeners that aren't co-parents and maybe can't quite relate or understand, it's a very unique relationship to be in as a human. For whatever reason, you decide you don't want to be in relationship with this other person, but you have kids with them. And so you have to be in a relationship with them. But instead of being married and maybe a bit unhappy, suddenly you're co-parenting and you're each dealing with difficult emotions, resentment from the past. And that's all coming into this high stakes relationship. And it's causing a lot of conflict, sometimes on the daily.
Yeah.
And, I could tell you a story, Jeff. Can I jump into a story of this?
Please do. Yes.
Okay. So this is about 6 years ago. I was getting started on my co-parenting journey. I just had moved into my first solo place, and things were really intense, and they were really intense between my co-parent and I. And I was going back and forth with her probably 10 to 20, 30 times a day in messaging. And some of these messages were quite triggering. So I'm remembering this moment of lying in my bed. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. I was falling off to sleep, and I got a notification on my phone. And it wasn't an email or an SMS notification. It was from Our Family Wizard, which is a co-parenting app. So I knew it was a message from my co-parent. And in that moment, I felt my heart racing. I felt sweat across my brow. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to go to sleep without reading that message,
Yeah.
let alone spend maybe an hour lamenting about how to respond well to this. And so that was the insight that, God, this is a hard problem to be in. I'm not going to be able to rebuild my life under these conditions. And what do I do? Well, I was already using a co-parenting app, which the courts recommended,
Yeah.
but it wasn't doing anything. And honestly, I didn't know what to do. I felt stuck, and it took another 3 years to get to a place where I was reading bedtime stories with my kids using AI, and I was coming up with these creative bedtime stories with them, and it was really fun. And then that night, I thought, well, gosh, AI is really clever in how it understands language. Maybe it would understand what I'm going through. And so I uploaded some of the messages between my co-parent and I, and my gosh, in that moment, I felt seen, I felt understood, and I felt like I had a game plan of how to manage this relationship a little bit better. And that was the spark that created Best Interest. I knew I had to build this for people.
I love it. You and I were meant to have this conversation because when I first discovered AI, I was like, you're actually a really good communicator. And I know it was programmed to be. And I said, I'm human and I'm flawed. Could you help me communicate better? And so we actually had long conversations about communication. And I'm just thinking out loud, and you're the expert, so I want to point it back to you. But you've got two people who were at one point in love, presumably. They produced an offspring that presumably both love, and all of a sudden, it's the little annoying things that make marriage worth working through that you work through. All of a sudden, when you're in a co-parenting situation, you don't have the reasons to be kind. And I'm fascinated. I knock on wood, I've never been divorced. My wife and I are exceptionally weird because we're still together and we're raising our kids together. But I've seen friends. One friend messaged me and said, stop talking to my ex-wife. I won you in the divorce. And I'm like, you guys actually named me? Yep. So, but it's like, because it was that petty, right? She wanted to hurt him. He wanted to hurt her. And so it got petty. So let's talk about what you've discovered with co-parenting, because first and foremost, I want to say the language of co-parent is so much more functional than ex-wife. So I feel like that's intentional as well.
It's true. Yeah. Co-parenting also is, some people don't like the word co-parent because they have such a challenging relationship with their ex that it's more like they want to parallel parent, where they're not collaborating. In some cases, it doesn't feel like collaboration is even possible.
Yeah.
And so, just to kind of step you into this arena, co-parenting apps are not a new concept. I'm entering into a very wide array of existing incumbents. And yet these co-parenting apps are designed primarily to deter conflict by threatening court. So everything you write to your co-parent is going to be recorded in a place where then your co-parent can take it to court. Well, I've gone through the family court system, and at least here in the US, it sucks. I mean,
Nobody wins.
Everyone, best intentions, of course, everyone's trying to do their best, but
yeah.
It's long, it's slow, and it doesn't have any heart. It doesn't really understand emotion. And what they're doing is I believe in these co-parenting apps, they're kind of forcing these poor co-parents into this toxic cycle of, well, look, judge, look what he said to me. And then the judge is like, well, I don't really care. He didn't threaten your life or the kid's life, so I can't do anything, right? I'm sorry for you, but I can't do anything. And so it's not a real deterrent. And it wasn't a real deterrent in our particular relationship either. And so that's really the magic of best interest is we can take AI and we can serve as a shield and a mediator. So one of the biggest insights and special features of best interest is that you're no longer beholden to your co-parent's moods. When your co-parent is maybe feeling a little spicy today, she or he might send you a message that is, filled with shame language, filled with, just their resentment of
Yeah.
you. And that's going to get you defensive and that's going to take you away from the kids. Well, with best interest installed, we're going to filter that message coming from them. We're going to take out anything that isn't specifically child focused and collaborative, and everything else gets stripped out. So you can view that original message if you want to, but you're in charge of what you want to see in that moment, which allows you to stay present with that next chapter of your life, your kids, right?
Oh,
So, and that's
brilliant. I mean,
yeah,
sorry, you're passing over this like you've walked this path a while, but let's
yeah,
roll that back because if you think about, and I know you've thought about it,
yeah.
if I'm having a day, I don't need someone else's anger or vitriol or whatever. And that's fascinating that you can arrange, okay, Timmy needs to be picked up at 2 for soccer. Great. Okay, I didn't need the other diatribe. I feel like this would be
Yeah.
useful in a lot of scenarios, but it's funny. One of my friends was married to and divorced a psychopath,
Mm,
diagnosed psychopath. I don't think your app would help him because she was just evil. Like there was intent to everything.
wow.
But most parents, I believe, and I'm a loving dad first. I think most people would want to put their kids first. But again, if I got cut off in traffic and then I'm texting my ex and saying, "Why haven't you picked up Timmy for soccer?" I might get a little spicy, as you said. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. So they can see the original message, but really, truly, do you want to? I'm going to guess most of the time nobody bothers. Is that fair or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say it's about 50-50. And in fact, we do find that most people give it a moment. So before reading that original message, maybe they're with their therapist or with a supportive friend, or maybe they've dropped off their kids already. So it's an okay time for them to process. I am all about being present with, the challenges that we face, including our ex's communication. These are triggers that we would do well by processing and figuring out. I know in my own life, I see my ex as my biggest teacher. That I have gone through this really challenging process, and yet I feel so much stronger because I've learned how to set boundaries with her. I've learned how to communicate in a way that creates peace actively with her, and that's through this very long process of just learning how to heal my emotions that come up when I receive communication. And then I can apply that to the other difficult people in my life. We can all think about, like you mentioned, bosses, coworkers, the person we're married to currently, right?
Yeah.
We can sometimes be faced with these really challenging relationships. And I believe that AI can play a really big role for us in helping to create peace between people.
Well, and it's fascinating because I believe in communication. There is stimulus, pause, response. Most people go straight from stimulus to response, and that's when you don't pause. That's when you meet a emotion with your emotion, and all of a sudden it snowballs and escalates. I think what I like about AI is it allows you to communicate your thoughts, but not to the other person. You can pause and say, okay, I'm feeling this. Should I express this, or how could I express it? But the reality is, I think most people think that the only option is let's go emotion to emotion, and then you end up in shouting matches that didn't need to exist.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a good point too. Using like ChatGPT or Gemini chat can almost get you in trouble. From my experience and working with clients that are co-parenting, um, it, it seems like these chat systems are programmed to get you to like them, probably because they want you to keep paying for their service, and they're never going to push back. So if you are, writing to chat and saying, "Well, this is what my ex is like, and she's a narcissist, and I need your help," well, it's going to agree with you, and it's going to say, "Yeah, you should do that," and it's going to be a yes man. But that's not necessarily the best scenario for you if you're really desiring peace, especially if you have kids. And so oftentimes, we will push back on the message that you're about to send, saying, "Jeff, hold on a moment. This might come across in a way you didn't expect. This is what we would recommend sending instead."
Yeah, I love that. And now, how did the software evolve? Because I'm guessing first and foremost, you're in the throes of dealing with co-parenting. Where did your brain say, I'm going to stop and go on this side tour and make software?
Yeah. So I, at that point, had been retired for, maybe a good 8 years or so, and completely out of the software game. It'd been a long time since I'd touched code. And I was talking with my current partner about it and saying, here's my idea. And gosh, do I hire this out? How do I build this? And thought, there's so many cool tools now. And it was a little early for AI coding at that point. And I just decided to get back up on the saddle and start coding it myself. And with a little bit of AI assistance, it all came back. And these days, currently, AI is playing a larger and larger role in the development of the app. But in the early days, that was just me doing my best to get up to speed on the latest and greatest.
I love it. Now, I'm reading my notes, and I wanted to bring up a couple of things. So
Yeah.
first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit more about best interest. But I remember that you're backed by Dr. Ramani. How did that come about? Because she's sacred in our house.
Oh, great.
We love Dr. Ramani. So
Yeah, she's wonderful. And in the throes of my marriage ending, there were a few key points. I found a book by Judy Orloff that talked about empaths. The title is I'm blanking on right now. But she introduced me to this idea of like being an empath. And when I read it, I thought, gosh, that's me to a T. This makes sense. And then I got the chapter on narcissism, and suddenly, like, all the confusion that I had been experiencing in various relationships in my life, it started to become more clear that empaths, narcissists, there's this attraction. Then I started watching videos. I searched those terms on YouTube, and I found Dr. Ramani. I thought, wow, this is some really good content. And I feel like she, above any other leader in the space, thought leader, helped see me through the really dark times of understanding myself, learning how to get out of my victimhood, and learning how to grow, and then eventually get out of my marriage. And so when I was starting this company, I knew, because I don't have a credential behind my name, I'm not a therapist, but I wanted to have more of a therapeutic mindset about this approach. I didn't want to go to a lawyer. I wanted to go to someone who had experience in therapy. And so I thought, gosh, maybe I should just long shot it and reach out to Dr. Ramani. I literally cold emailed her. I said, would you be open to talking to me about this idea? She said, sure. And we had the best meeting. It was like firing all cylinders. She completely got it. She already had a bunch of ideas. She spent the next week just I don't know how she had time, but she was deep diving into the app that I had built so far, giving me some great feedback. She was the reason why we actually hide that original message until you want to see it, because she said, I have clients who are co-parenting that bring me in messages from their ex, and they want help, but it was like a week ago and the charge is down. But wouldn't it be great if you could take that original message into the office with the therapist
Yeah.
and say, okay, I'm going to read this now and I'm going to feel the emotion now and let's process it together. I think that's one of the coolest features of Best Interest that allows people to truly heal. So yeah, anyway, that's how Dr. Ramani got involved, and she has been helping us all throughout.
You just confirmed something I've long suspected. I've always thought she would be a fascinating person to talk to, and she's a data geek. I knew it.
Yeah.
Just something about her. It's like she's one of us.
So sharp. Yeah.
And for what it's worth, she's helped my wife and I deal with some narcissistic relatives. And the concept of gray rock, it was like, ooh, I can do that.
Yes, absolutely.
And for what it's worth, so I am a deep, deep empath, as is my wife. So we can feel other people's pain. And I think one of the things I like about AI is I can filter some of that so that it's not right in here. Because once it gets in my head, I got to deal with it. But if I can pre-filter it, I have certain people between you and me. I've built custom GPTs that reflect who they are. And when they send me messages, I let it filter from what they say to what I need to hear.
Amazing.
And then I respond.
Jeff, I think that this is the future of communication. Honestly, I think that we all hold so much in our past, so many resentments. Some people, we haven't really done the healing necessary to show up in a good way with each other. And AI, honestly, it can sit in between humans and help translate. And I don't think that you should be, your communication with other people should be dictated by them. I think it should be dictated by you.
Yeah.
When you're communicated with, how you're communicated with, that should be your decision, especially as an empath. We take on so much crap, and it can really impact the way we show up in life. So
there's days I hate going out shopping because it's like, I don't know what I'm bringing home with me. You know, it's like there's little mind bugs that just hop aboard, and it's like, oh God, where'd that come from?
That's real. Yeah.
So I'm going to share something because you're dealing with AI as well as communication. I am fascinated by things like Myers-Briggs or Colby scores. And again, I'm not saying people are neat little buckets and you can put them there, but my biggest aha moment, and I want to hear more about how you deal with it. High fact finders on the Colby drive me crazy because I'm high quick start and I'm medium fact finder. So I play nice with medium fact finders, low fact finders, but high fact finders drive me crazy. And fair, I drive them crazy because I'm like, okay, we're moving. And they're like, no, we got to plan the trip. We got to, and it's funny because my wife is a high fact finder. So my version of vacation is, hey, let's go to Hawaii. She says, great. And then she plans out every second of the itinerary. And it's like, where's the downtime? You forgot the beach time. I like a little cushion in there. But then when we get there, I'm like, hey, why don't we go explore this? And she's like, that's not on the agenda. And I'm like, uh-oh. But I'm finding when we understand how we need to be communicated. The other thing I find I'm fascinated by is learning styles, because learning styles influence communication styles. When we understand ours, it's easier to empathize and understand others. So how are you training Best Interest? And again, I'm not looking for your secrets, but what are some of the philosophies that drive how the AI is working?
Oh, that's a great question, and I have a few different ways that I could take the response, because you mentioned a lot of things that are of interest to me. Before I get into Best Interest, have you ever heard of Enneagram?
Yes.
I think that's a wonderful technology. I'm a 6-wing-7, and it informs a lot of aspects of me. My partner is a 7-wing-6. So we kind of have these overlaps, but then what I think is so wonderful about these systems, especially when we're talking about relationship, is that they help us understand our partner more. Instead of saying, well, why aren't they like this? Why aren't they like me? Right? You start realizing, okay, we're together because actually we each have our own special abilities, and that helps us become stronger. So it's allowed me to be a bit more easeful about some of the things that maybe are triggering for me. Like, oh, it's because she's an Enneagram 7 and she just has a different perspective. And so it allows us to both understand each other better. And then also, I wanted to mention Gene Keys. That's a system that I really enjoy as well, which is based on human design. I highly recommend taking a look at it. It feels to me when I read it as I'm reading from just source knowledge of how all of the universe works and all of humanity works. I'm like, okay, now I know the steps of my life. It's a very complete and cool system.
Well,
Yeah.
it, just one of the things I'm nerding out about right now is, oddly, the more I get to know myself, the less annoying other people are to me, because I'm not being triggered by whatever look, or because, again, being an empath, sometimes I'm carrying something I picked up just from a random person. And then when somebody comes at me and I'm like, okay, am I reacting as me or as whatever's circling me right now? And it's a fascinating thing, because I love being empathetic, but there's days it was like, okay, all of you just be quiet, just everybody. So one of my mentors actually taught me something really weird, and I'm going to share it with you. He taught me to meditate and focus on my skin and to feel my skin. And he said, can you feel it? And it was like, you envision the difference between your skin and the air, and how it touches you. And he said, okay, everything inside that skin is yours. You're in charge of it. You've got to control it. Everything else outside of that is not you. Let it go. And believe it or not, as an empath, I was like, wait, I can do that? And that was huge. So,
Yeah.
so you and I are going to have more conversations on this, because I think it's when I meet fellow empaths, and on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ. There's not a lot of us.
Yeah.
And when I meet others, it's like, okay, we're building a community of empathetic people, because we all think that there's something wrong with us because we feel so much. A friend of mine, he couldn't fly because he'd get really anxious. And he's like, turns out I don't hate to fly. It's just I feel everybody else who hates to fly.
That's cool. Yeah, I've always in my life I've had a really interesting relationship with the term sensitive. It is often leveraged as somewhat of an attack on us empaths.
Yep.
And in my marriage, that was something that she would say often. And because I wasn't very self-loving at that time, I would take it as a slight, oh, I guess I am too sensitive. I must be hypersensitive or something like that. And it was driving me really to close down, to shut off, and to not be shining my light. And I've found that as I've like you mentioned, as I've learned to love myself more, accept myself for who I am, the more I can show up and say, heck yeah, I'm sensitive. That's a fucking superpower. I'm so glad that I am, because I can feel things that are helping me make decisions. And by the way, I think everyone is on some level of sensitive. We just have various ways of coping, shutting that out. And the people that are least sensitive are the ones that are just most closed down. And I feel really sorry for them. I hope that they learn how to open up and be more attuned to the world that they're living in.
It's funny. I used to be jealous of those people. I'd be like, man, it must be, narcissists. I'd look at them and go, man, that must be an easy life. But then I realized that they're fueled by unending self-loathing, and therefore their outer peace does not reflect the turmoil in. And I think with empathetic people, and I believe it's a skill that can be nurtured and grown. It's a muscle. Now, I'm fascinated because one of the things I hear a lot with AI, and we can go down this deeper on our next conversation, but there's safety rails, because we all heard stories about ChatGPT plotting somebody's murder, suicide, and things like that. How critical is that in your work? Because I mean, you're not only dealing with co-parenting, which is a complex dynamic, but there's also children involved. So
Yeah, that's a great question. I do get asked that quite a bit, and we have a unique perspective. So we are dealing with chat messages from co-parents that are asking for general advice. We have a co-parenting coach built into the app, and we also have messaging passing between co-parents. And sometimes that messaging is honestly very and awful and threatening and scary. And so in those situations, I've been asked by therapists, well, gosh, are you doing therapy? Are you reporting this to CPS? Are you, well, we can't do that, really. That's not our role. I don't see our role as being a proactive protector in that way. We're going to filter the message out so you don't have to see it immediately if it's really harmful, but we'll indicate on there that this is a threat and you might want to review it. So it gives the impetus to the receiver because they know their local jurisdiction, they know, their history with their co-parent, and they're going to know how to respond a lot better than we can for situations like that. So that's one area I think that there is a guardrail, but then there's also it always falls back on a human. The humans have to decide what actions. We're not going to take an action for you. We're not going to send a message on your behalf. And then the other thing is, fortunately, in a co-parenting arrangement, there is a fine, narrow band of things that are considered child-focused and co-parenting related. Everything else gets stripped out. It's actually a fairly simple problem when you look at that. So if a co-parent starts running their mouth and going in a different direction, that's our guardrail. We don't have to, we'll filter that out. So it actually kind of makes the job a bit easier.
you're literally plucking the noise out of the signal. I say this sincerely. I love what you're doing. I I have this weird vision. A friend of mine and I, we were working on something, and I'm suddenly seeing it clearer. He said, right now everybody communicates with me the way they want to. So they'll send me a text or they'll leave a voicemail or they'll call or whatever. He said, wouldn't it be nice if we all had like a universal translator where whatever comes in, and then it gets delivered to us the way we need it? And his example was he has a Gen Z in his office. He's a baby boomer. And the server went down. Literally, the building was on fire. And the Gen Zer sent him a text. And he had his phone off. And he's like, that should have been a phone call. Sorry, let me rephrase that. When I could have done something about the fire, it should have been a phone call. Afterwards, should have been a phone call. But I'm fascinated, and you're officially part of a very small tribe in my world, because most conflict, I believe, comes from poor or improperly formed communication. I feel like you'd be amazing at conflict resolution too. I mean, just think of the hostage negotiators and like, there's so much that AI can do, and not replacing humans, but giving us superpowers to be clear in how we communicate.
Absolutely. And I think that we live at an interesting time that for most of humanity, the communication that we had with other humans was in person.
Yeah.
And there are certain buffers and protections. If you don't want to talk to someone, you just avoid them, right?
Yeah.
But now we have these cell phones that are always on, they're always beeping, they're always trying to get our attention. It's hard to avoid communication from everywhere.
Yep.
And that's a difficult thing for a human mind to tackle. And so it's very noisy. It's constant. I think that vision that your friend spoke of, I think that's a really good vision. I believe that will be the way that we evolve communication, is that we are the receiver and we should get to decide when, how often, and what comes through. Right? Why is it up to someone to decide how it comes through and what they say to me. I don't know what's going on in their life right now or where they're at or how stressed they are, but they get to send whatever they want to me. No, no.
Whatever, whenever,
Yeah.
however. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds a Shakira song. Anyways, okay, you are fascinating, my friend. So where can people go to learn more about you or best interests and just learn about co-parenting?
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on today. So, if there are co parents in the audience that would like to check out the app, it can be downloaded for free at bestinterestapp.com, or just search it out on Google Play or the App Store, and we're there. And I always love hearing from people in the space, people in the AI space or communication or mediation. Reach out to me. I'm just founder at bestinterest.app.
Love it, love it. And my audience is nerds, so you're going to get inundated, I think. But thank you so much for being on the show and for hanging out with me.
Nice connecting with you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.